Hello, this is Tammy DeCaro. Art was something different for you than my usual painting and resin videos. You may not know this, but I was a jewelry maker long ago, specifically different beaded jewelry. And today I am preparing a video for a group here in Naples that I am teaching later this month, which will be the crocheted wire necklace. So let's talk about what we need. This is a 3mm crochet hook. You can use, I would say any size from 3 to maybe 6mm. Just know that the size of your crochet hook will determine the size of the loops that you crochet. So let me show you what I mean. This is the size that I like, which is what I get with a 3mm crochet hook. You also need a spool of wire, and I'm using 26 gauge wire. 28 is actually even easier to work with. So if you have problems with arthritis or other things, you might want to choose 28 gauge. That's what I usually start a beginning class out on because it is easier to work with. If you don't know this, the gauge number refers to how soft and how thin the wire is. So 26 gauge is a little thicker and more resistant than 28 gauge. So you'll also need what I call a bead mix. I use these, what do you call them? Like meal prep containers. And I have an assortment of beads in here, all different sizes. Probably the biggest size is maybe 8mm. I should probably measure that. I don't know for sure. But I usually suggest that you go between, smaller sizes like this one and larger sizes and a mix of finishes. So we have some very shiny dyed shell beads. These are coin beads. We have chips of turquoise. Believe that's turquoise. I have a bunch of square accent beads. I have some clear chips, clear crystal chips, which is always nice to provide some, contrast in shape and style. And then I have a ton of these faceted round glass beads in different colors and different styles. This is a traditional wire crochet bead mix of sizes. Now, let me caution you, if you were to use a really heavy bead, it doesn't matter what size it is, that might impact your wire crochet. And what I mean by that is we want these to be very light. And so you don't want a super heavy, large bead. Keep your larger beads something that's more lightweight. Like this coin bead out of shell is actually very lightweight compared to this glass bead. Or actually, that's not glass. I think it's howlite, possibly. But, you don't want something that's super heavy. So how do we start? Because this is a video, part 1 of 2 parts. I'm going to show you how to actually crochet the beads and then finish the jewelry. So the very first thing you want to do is measure out about 3 to 4 feet of your wire. And as you can see here, I have already started beading my wire. So you're going to measure out 3 to 4 feet of your wire, and when you get to that 4 foot, it's really strongly recommended that you do 2 things. First, we are not cutting the wire off of this spool. We're using it. We're going to keep it. So the first thing you need to do once you measure out your 3 to 4 feet is generally on a spool of wire you have this catch. I like to do two things. I like to catch that, and then using painter's tape or masking tape, put a piece of tape there so that I know I have to bead down to this level. And then take your bead mix and just start beading on randomly, and the secret to this is random, all of your beads. And I like to kind of go back and forth between shapes and sizes, large and small. So I've got 2 good size beads here. Now I'll come in with an accent bead, maybe even one of these little round white ones. Because when you start to crochet, what you want is variety. So if you look at all of my beads I have strung so far, there's a lot of variety there. This is something that's really easy to do while you're watching the news or watching TV. You can kind of sit with these in your lap and bead out your 3 to 4 feet. Now, why 3 to 4 feet? Well, as we crochet, depending on how tightly you crochet and how closely you space your beads, you might need 4 feet of pre-strung beads and you might need 3 feet. It just depends. I typically have extra beads left when I'm done, so these little containers are great. I can just put this back on, put this on the shelf, add more beads to it later. If I decide to make another mix in this color, I could add some other colors to it to make a completely new necklace. But these containers are great. They stack right on top of each other, and they're an awesome way to keep your bead mix so that you can make additional pieces later. All right, so wire crochet, don't let that scare you. You really don't need to know how to crochet. We are doing a simple chain stitch. So if you do know how to crochet, it's helpful for you to know that we are just doing a chain stitch. We are not joining or doing anything else with a traditional crochet. It's not like you're making a blanket and you're joining rows. I take my wire with a couple inches of tail and just twist that around. And then that tail, I generally keep up here in my hand, but it doesn't matter. This is our first starting point on this particular chain. So the way you want to start and end each of your strands is a few chains with no beads. So you're going to bring this wire up over, hold this knot, pull it through, and don't bead too tightly. See, I tend to bead very tight, and it can be a problem for me. You can always back that out, open up your loop a little bit, and bring that back through. The hardest part of doing this technique is just getting it started. Once you get going, again, this is something really great that you can just sit and do almost mindlessly once you get it started. While you're talking to someone, watching TV, talking to your family on the phone, sitting out on your lanai and enjoying this beautiful weather we're having. You don't even really have to think about it. But you want to chain. You see that we're just making a chain. You want to chain about 2 to 3 inches of just straight chain. And this isn't the greatest day for me to show you how to do this because I'm having issues with my thumb, this thumb. So anyway, you see how I'm keeping a little bit down here and I'm pulling this through. So there's no joining. We don't have to worry about marrying our strands together with another chain stitch like you would in a traditional crocheted sweater or blanket. This is just a straight chain that we are stitching here. So one of the challenges is you can get really, as I mentioned earlier, too tight. And you don't want that. You want this to be loose. And it is my biggest challenge in wire crochet. I'm giving the folks in my class 28 gauge wire, so it'll actually be a little bit easier for you to keep your chains loose than I'm having with this 26 gauge wire. But if you see what I'm doing, I'm using this thumb and forefinger to kind of set up my stitch. I'm holding it here, and pulling it through. So I'm kind of holding that loop open as I pull that stitch through. What's the purpose of doing this? Well, we're using this wire to essentially suspend our beads across multiple strands, and I like a 5 to 6 strand necklace, and that is really relative. It's relative to what size beads you're using. It's relative to what size crochet hook you're using. So, you know, for the purposes of this class that I'm teaching here in Naples, we are going to do 5 or 6 strands, and assuming you're keeping your beads, you know, anywhere from very small to 8 millimeters or so, we're probably going to, and also knowing that we're using a pretty small crochet hook, we're going to have a tighter chain and a thinner strand. So now that I have this, I'm going to start bringing up my beads. And what I like to do is just kind of move up 3 or 4 and hold these in my palm of my hand and keep the bead we're going to start integrating right here. So same steps. You're going to loop over your crochet hook, pull it through, and I'm now, instead of holding just the wire loop, I'm holding the bead. So you're holding the bead, and of course, I got that super tight. Let me show you how you fix that. You can move your bead out a little bit, make your bottom loop a little bigger, and then pull through. So I have one bead on. At this point, you can decide, do you want multiple chains between beads, or do you want your bead mix to be very dense? And what I mean by that is how many chains, single chains without a bead, you do between them. And I like to mix it up a little bit. Let me show you what I mean. I have a few strands already done. So this one has basically one chain in between each bead. This one has 2 chains between each bead. So you see it is very specific how close your beads are with how many chains you put in between. I like to mix it up. I'll make 1 strand out of my 6 strands very loose, one, you know, maybe with 2 chains between beads, and the rest with 1 chain or no chains between beads. So let's see what that looks like together. So this is 1 chain, 2 chains, sometimes 3, and no chains between. This is a very dense bead mix. This is our loosest so far, and this is somewhere in the middle. No chain, 1 chain, 2 chains. So when we wrap 6 strands together, which is what we will do when we're finally done with all of this, it creates a really nice variegated type of chain. And you can really see how beautiful that's going to be once you look at 3 together. Imagine 5 or 6. So if it's hard for you to remember what you did with each strand, I would say a good rule of thumb is 1 or 2 chains between your beads and then do all your strands that way. You don't have to vary them the way I did. You can also do no chains between all your beads and have a very dense necklace. So right now I have no chains, 1 chain, 2 chains. I'm probably going to do another one of each of these. No chain, 1 chain, 2 chains. Okay, so I'm going to continue. I have 3 strands finished. I need 3 more. I am going to continue bringing my beads up my wire, and this is why we don't cut it off, because you have to constantly be letting out more wire so that you can crochet. And currently I'm crocheting with no spaces between beads except where I have big beads. So I will do a slip or 2 between them. And so I bring up 3 beads, hold those 2 in my hand, pull this down with my left hand, and bring that crochet hook through. And of course, sometimes you need to kind of position it, hold it, and then pull your hook through. Do not worry if your stitches are very loose. That's okay. If you're a very loose crochet stitcher, then definitely you want no spaces between your beads. If you're tight, like I am, then it may be a little bit of work for you to get enough space in between your beads. Makes them look like they're floating. Okay, so that was a bigger bead, and I have another one in my next bead, so I'm adding a single crochet in between. And when I do that, I want to make sure I leave enough space here and space here to get my crochet. So I'm going to make a right angle there so that bead stays down there and I get enough room to bring it in. See? So pretty straightforward. If you've ever crocheted, this is going to be super easy for you. And what I like about doing this is it's something that you can do while you're doing other things. Sometimes I'm watching Netflix while I do this, or talking to my family. When we watch the evening news, I'll sit there with this in my lap and kind of stitch away while we watch TV together. A couple of other things to just be mindful of. Once you string all of your beads onto your wire and you get down to your tape, you need to take that tape off before you start crocheting, obviously. But it's a good idea to kind of coil this up into maybe a larger bowl or Tupperware, just so that you have some place to keep your wire from rolling all over the floor, and this strand is closer to you and not pulling on the back end. So that's something to pay attention to. So I'm just going to keep crocheting until I finish this strand and then go on to my next one. Okay, so I'm almost at the end, and I want to show you how to finish your strand. Of course, I pulled that too tight. I have from bead to bead about 18 inches on each strand, and about 3 inches of single chain wire. So when we get to the end of this strand, it's very easy to finish it. But first, we have to do our single chains. This is really important. We have to give ourselves some wire to work with when we finish this and attach our clasps. So I'm gonna just do that single chain, just like we started the strand, and try to get about 2 to 3 inches. Now, you could leave your strands all in front of you while you're beading, and then you can compare as you go along. That's kind of how I do it. So I get them about the same length from the first bead to the last bead. So I keep comparing the current strand I'm crocheting to that so that I can try to get them close. And the reason we want to do that is because it's difficult to put together a necklace when your strands are all different lengths. So that's really the best way to do it. Or you could, you know, have a tape measure or a ruler or something. So I'm going to continue the single chain and try to get that finish. And I feel like I have plenty of space here. So how you end this, and actually this is a really good kind of what happens if. So obviously I pulled this one way too loose before. It's fine. We're just gonna push it together, and when we go finish, especially these, they're gonna be hidden anyway, so it's not a big deal. But I still want to keep this loop out just so I know I'm gonna get my hook through. That's a good, if there's anything you take from this video, it's that don't have super tight stitches because it's really harder to work with. All right, so I have plenty of real estate to work with here on my wire. How do I finish this? Well, you're going to take your flush cut or scissors, because this is very thin wire, so it's not going to cause a problem. Flush cut the end. Before you pull this out, grab that last chain and pull your wire through. That will kind of make a knot there. Pull that tight, and it is secure. So now let's compare that with our other strands. And so we have 4 so far. I'm kind of laying them out bead to bead. As I said earlier, it doesn't matter if you have a lot of extra wire on the ends. That's a good thing. It gives us something to work with. This is a good time when you have 4 strands to kind of look at it and say, I really like the density of these beads, or I need my beads closer together or further apart, because we have 2 more strands to do. So I could easily fix that problem on the other strands. So this is a good time to kind of check that. And I probably will, this one had no space between, one space between, 2 spaces. So I probably will do 2 more. So let's review. You're going to single chain stitch your beads onto your strands. Make sure you're leaving 16 or 20 at the end of each strand. And I want to zoom out here for a second. You also want to make sure that the length between your beads, so your first bead and your last bead, are pretty similar. So when I'm measuring this out, as I'm crocheting my strand, I'm constantly looking at how close are my sizes. So this one, first bead, last bead. So I'm crocheting about 16 to 18 inches of beads because I like this necklace to sit right at the hollow of my throat, and I can always adjust that. But if you have one strand that's this short and one strand that's super long and another strand that's somewhere in the middle, it's going to be difficult to make that into something pretty. So you want to keep your first bead to last bead about the same length. So what I do typically is as I do my strand, I leave it right there. I'm crocheting, crocheting, crocheting. As I get towards what I think might be the end, I bring it up and compare. Okay, fine, that looks good. They're about the same length. Now I can do on both ends my tail, which is, 16 to 20 single chains. And the reason we need that is because when we finish these necklaces, this part is the necklace. This part will go into a cone and a clasp. And we need something in terms of, we need some wire in order to shape that and get that into the cone finish end and attach the clasp and the extender chain. So that's why you want to, like, I feel like this is maybe even too short. So I would definitely add 16 to 20 single chains at the beginning and end of every strand. So when I see my group of Naples folks, hopefully you'll have your 5 or 6 strands crocheted so that we can focus on how to finish our necklace in our next session. And for those of you who aren't here in Naples and not taking my class, I will be filming the finishing touches as well. So there will be a part 2 to this video. Thank you so much. Hopefully you have everything you need in terms of starting from your bead mix to your crocheting, and I'll see you soon. We're going to make some beautiful jewelry together.